Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Two Cent. My name is Paul Emerson, and I made a script. And I usually don't do that. I usually do this kind of thing off the top of my head, and so I'm not even sure how to transition to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the general gist. This is going to be an episode because it's trending, based on the Little Mermaid being cast as a African American character. I think she's African American. I didn't do a lot of research. There's a lot of controversy, obviously, and I'm gonna read the script. And I'll probably spend a lot of time looking down at this paper because, like I said, I usually do this off the top of my head, and I haven't developed the technique of being able to read off of a script and look at the camera. So I'll probably spend the whole rest of this video just reading this. So maybe I'll just do it this way. Okay. Hello, welcome to My Two Cent. My name is Paul Emerson, and I am the host of My Two Cent. Because it's trending, I will be talking about the science of a black mermaid. My Two Cent is a channel dedicated to self-improvement through self-re-education based on the principles of empirical science and philosophy. I welcome spirituality and religion, but I am not a follower of any organized religion. I was born African American and raised Christian, but I do not define myself as Christian. At best, I am Tao, but I practice a scientific discipline. I operate objectively from a scientific perspective, and I operate subjectively from a philosophical position. I have a second channel called My Two Cent Comics, where I have been devoting most of my present free time. As I am enlisted active duty soldier, I have little to no free time. So I have to focus my efforts, and as of late, I've been busy developing multiverse theory for My Two Cent Comics, Omniverse. Recently, while working on the Power Wisdom and Courage Omniverse, I outlined a taxonomical ranking system for the PwC Omniverse. This system is fluid enough to be applied to any construct being used in the context of the many worlds interpretation. I am both a scientist and a fiction writer, so when I heard someone imply that it is unscientific for a mermaid to be black based on a science, well, I had to stop developing Azeroth's creation mythology. Azeroth, sometimes called the Outer Descendant, the Blind Idiot God, Nuclear Chaos, the Demon Sultan, the Deep Dark One, the Cold One. The Outer God, Azeroth, is the primordial god for all the cosmic report and is considered the primordial creative deity of the Power Wisdom and Courage Omniverse. Tassahova is both wife and sister to Azeroth, through which all entities in the Power Wisdom and Courage universe are said to have come into being. Disclaimer. From this point forward, you will most likely be triggered because its training is meant to expand and grow my channel. My introduction is over. Now is where I will do the YouTube thing and say, please leave a like and consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed. Because I am also part nerd, I am going to prove scientifically that a mermaid can in fact be Negroid. In the context of this video, I will be using three primary categories for human ethnicity: Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid. There are a lot of species of fish, but in the context of this video, I will be focusing on relative groups of taxa, upon which I will use to build my scientific proofs. We will talk about the taxa of what a fish is in a minute, but first I want to simplify the species for the context of YouTube videos. There are two primary environments that fish live in within the earth: freshwater and saltwater. There are environments that aquatic animals can live in: near the surface for atmospheric breeding species, below the surface for aquatic breeding species that predominantly swim as a means of locomotion, a subaquatic floor for species that are heavier than water and live on or close to or within/under the ground floor or above the water. Subaquatic floor are further divided into various regions based on the ocean's depth. I would have to almost do an entire video dedicated to just aquatic ecosystems just to define what a fish is. All we need to know for the context of this taxa-based system is that fish live in water and water blocks sunlight. The various environments that mermaids could live in would affect the environment of the fish living in that region of the world. The attributes of a fish that we are concerned with are as follow. Fish have bodies covered in scales, are multicellular, sexually reproducing, cold-blooded, aquatic swimmers, gill-breathing, endoskeleton vertebrates that lay eggs. Humans are multicellular, have bodies covered in hair, mammalian glands for producing milk, sexually reproducing, warm-blooded, biped terrestrial, nose-breeding, endoskeleton vertebrates that give birth and nurse their live young. Zoomorphic is a term used to describe an organism that embodies the qualities of two distinctively separate species. The best example of this is the duck-billed platypus, which is a marsupial. Mermaids have bilateral symmetry, with an anatomy divided by ratios of hominid and Alexa. What is a scientific name for a fish? Alexa's still my co-host. Alexa, what is a scientific name for a fish?
Fish's scientific name is chordate.
Hominids and chordates. Their upper torso is usually fully defined by hominid attributes: a head, neck, torso, shoulder, arms, and hands, with the lower body being defined by chordates. The lower body of a mermaid typically grows out of what will be the head of the fish. Morphological attributes of the hominid extremities could also have further zoomorphic attributes of gills for breathing underwater, fish scales in place of mammalian hair/fur, and webbed extremities and joints for breathing aquatic locomotion. Features of the face, while in the form of predominantly hominids, can be zoomorphic in appearance. More aquatic as well to include having no nose, large fish-like lips, aquatic and antenna, etc. But the single most important zoomorphic attribute in the context of the video has to be melanin. Melanin is a natural pigment found in most organisms. In the context of taxonomy, melanin production is used primarily to define human ethnicity: Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid. There are a variety of sublet physiological attributes that are also directly associated with melanin production as well. These superficial attributes plus melanin activity defines ethnicities, in case you are not aware. Negroids have dark pigment due to high melanin activity/production, and Caucasians have light skin pigment due to low melanin activity/production, while Mongoloids falling somewhere in the middle. The variety of colors found in fish is also controlled by melanin production. As a scientific basis, the primary role of melanin in nature is naturally occurring ultraviolet radiation protection. Aquatic life, which has evolved underwater, will have no need for ultraviolet radiation protection due to the natural ultraviolet radiation protection of the water. Fish close to the surface of water would receive more sunlight and as such will be more melanin active, and fish close to the bottom of the ocean would receive little to no sunlight and as such would have little to no need for melanin production. However, there is a secondary role for melanin, and the role it plays in nature on land holds true to its function in the ocean. Defense. Pigmentation functions as warning/camouflage and plays a huge role in mating. Scientifically speaking, melanin exists within organisms far exceeds simple analogies to sunblock. If mermaids did not always exist in their kind, then the first primordial single-cell organism would have evolved to have been exposed to sunlight, then adapted the genes to produce melanin. Further evolving to become multicellular, then evolved into a fish, and then that fish would have to go through the motions to evolve into a human. That species of human would have to re-evolve back into a zoomorphic mermaid. Science has shown that all humans evolved from Negroid Africans. Because of this, the very first mermaid, like the first humans, would have been Negroid Africans. Once this early ancestral mermaid evolved the ability to breathe underwater, they would then be able to leave the surface of the water, where they would continue to be exposed to sunlight and go to the depths of the ocean floor, where their Negroid genes could potentially become recessive due to a lack of ultraviolet exposure. As mentioned before, ultraviolet protection is considered the basis of the evolution of pigment within the organism, but the primary use of pigment is camouflaging. It is not unreasonable to consider that many deep-water species are able to change both their color and texture to blend into their environment and become camouflaged to hide from predators. So in conclusion, a Negroid mermaid is a zoomorphic species that has adapted their dark skin for the use of defense and sexual reproduction. So it is very possible scientifically for a fictitious character to be of African descent. To play devil's advocate, and you notice all this stuff was written down because now we're going to move into the realm of unscientific. To play devil's advocate, Ariel's probably not black, because the definition of black is not the same definition of the taxonomical scale. There is no race in science. Science doesn't associate itself with race. This is the main reason why there's such a backlash when you make videos and conflict to changing a fictitious character's ethnicity. The African American girl has the same right to go see a live action Disney movie or Disney show or recreation of a Disney play and be able to see someone that looks familiar to her when she looks in the mirror, just like any other gender, just like any other ethnicity in America. Because America is literally the country that's built on racial equality, inclusion of ethnicity. We're all about, the acceptance of culture, and we're supposed to be higher than that as a group of people. And cultural diversity is supposed to be okay. So yeah, Ariel probably wouldn't be cast as black, because to be black is to have had a nationality synonymous with lands in Africa, and then having Caucasians come and take you from that land and bring you to another land, excuse me, strip you of your identity, and then force you into bondage and make you subhuman. Excuse me. That is the foundation of being black. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. So when I see a video where someone says, I don't think it's fair that they're changing the ethnicity of a... One second. So when I watch a video and I see someone say they don't think it's fair that they're changing the history of a fictitious character, me as an African American living in America that has aligned myself with the nation and considers myself a member of the nationality of the group of people called Americans, I don't think it's fair that I can't tell you that all of the documented history of discrimination in this country based on my skin color is valid and true and not be taken seriously, but you're offended that a character that looks like you is going to be painted darker than you. Because that's the reality of this whole conversation. Caucasians are triggered because they changed the darkness. Someone went into Photoshop and slid the darkness shader up on the image of a character, and that's offensive. That's offensive. But at the same time, African Americans are supposed to rise up, overcome, and feel like we're accepted. We constantly have this conflict with race in this country when it comes to the Africans. They're supposed to... The African American generally complains about the quality of life in America based on being African American, and Caucasians tell us that it's all in our heads. But all of the Disney princesses that have been Caucasian, no one has ever complained about them being Caucasian. There's not a single person in the African American community that's offended by a minority being cast in a role in the African. I mean, Princess and the Frog, she spent half the movie a frog. There's no complaint, there's no argument. That's just how it is, So I think the biggest and most important component to all of this is why I started my comic book company. I think more people that are African Americans should take the time out to create African American characters. Maybe Disney should... Wait, this is something I wanted to touch on, and I'll just kind of mix it into what I'm about to say. Maybe Disney should have casted a Caucasian actress to play Ariel, but we've always accused Disney of whitewashing. We've always accused the Hollywood for whitewashing. We always say that they always put European characters in roles that don't apply to them, right? And they always say, no, we just hire the best person for the role. Well, they're doing that. I don't know much about this character because I don't follow Disney like that. But maybe they're actually casting the female that most fits the attributes that define Ariel as a character. Maybe she has the talent and the qualifications, despite her ethnicity, to bring that character to life in a live action play. maybe Disney as a company did what they were supposed to do in the context of the medium that they're selling. Because at the end of the day, they're just trying to make money. They're just trying to make a profit and put together an experience that they can profit from. And maybe they chose to do what they've always done. Take someone that doesn't necessarily look like the character, put them in that role because they best embody that character. Maybe that's what's actually happening. On the flip side of that coin, maybe it would make more sense if Disney actually made a African American character that will also happen to be a mermaid. Maybe that is something that can happen. But here's the problem. If Disney makes a movie and if Disney makes a movie based on the Disney princess archetype, if Disney comes out with a movie specifically to make an African American character to appeal to the African American community and not have to take away a Disney princess from the Caucasian community, is the same community that is upset and offended that Disney is changing Ariel to an African American character going to be upset and offended that Disney is producing a product for the African American community. Because that is the foundation of racism. The foundation of racism, the one that I use, is the ability for Caucasians to discriminate against minorities because they hold the dominant political and judicial power in this country. Because I'm just making a YouTube video, voicing my opinion. There's someone in Disney that could say, you know what, Ariel? You know what, Halle Berry? Unfortunately, there's too much controversy right now about you being in this lead role, so we're gonna find someone that looks more like the Caucasian girl that actually was drawn for Ariel, and you're basically fired. You're basically fired because too much of our profit margin is gonna tank because too many members of our society don't want to see you in that role. That's what makes it ultimately discrimination. That's what ultimately makes it racism, because they control the entire industry. They control the entire environment of what happens in this society. They mostly influence it, but they have enough influence that if they choose to do something wrong without balance, if there's no one to check you for doing the wrong thing, then you're in control, then you are in power. And Emperor Palpatine got granted emergency powers to control the clone army without getting permission or consent from the Galactic Senate, which meant he could do whatever he wanted because he had that power. And that's pretty much why I define racism as unchecked Caucasian legislation. The ability for them to just make blanketed decisions because they control everything. Bill Gates, he could just decide, you know what? I want to make sure that anyone that lives in a zip code that happens to be predominantly African American pays 20% more for any Windows license that they get for their computer. Because as long as there's no one to tell me otherwise, I control Windows, so that's what I'm gonna do. And if the other Caucasians around him don't say, "Hey man, that's not cool," you can't make people that are poor pay more money for a product than people that are rich are paying for. And he's like, well, why not? Like, because that's just wrong, So I'm rambling, and I don't need to ramble anymore. I made my case. I showed scientifically how this ludicrous statement is not scientific.